Imagine you are standing at the foot of a colossal stone fortress as the first light of dawn touches the jagged battlements. To the world outside, these walls are a symbol of power or a distant threat. To you, they are the edges of the universe. You are one of the many souls whose entire journey from birth to the grave takes place within this circle of granite. There is a specific rhythm to this existence, governed by the sound of boots on cobblestones and the crackle of wood smoke in the great hall. The modern world disappears as you step through the heavy iron gates. You feel the cool, damp air of the corridors and hear the constant hum of life behind the masonry. From the lowest servant to the highest lord, your world is defined by the weight of these stones. Welcome to the life inside the castle. Imagine that your very first sensation of the world is not the softness of a garden or the wide openness of a field, but the unyielding embrace of ancient stone. Before you even understand the concept of a window or a door, you feel the specific, heavy stillness of a room carved into the heart of a tower. Your first cry does not drift away into the open air. Instead, it rises toward a vaulted ceiling of dark oak and gray granite, echoing back to you in a soft, hollow vibration. You are a child of the fortress. From the moment the midwife lifts you into the flickering light of a tallow candle, your world is defined by the thickness of the walls and the security of the curtain wall. To those outside, this place is a monument of war. To you, it is the only cradle you will ever know. The room where you are born is likely the solar or a private bedchamber high within the keep. It is a space designed to hold the warmth of a central hearth, yet even in the height of summer, the stone remembers the winter. The air carries a faint, persistent scent of wood smoke, dried lavender, and the damp, mineral smell of the masonry itself. Your mother lies within a massive four-poster bed, its heavy velvet curtains drawn tight to create a small, warm world within the larger, colder one. These curtains are your first boundaries. They filter the gray light of a misty morning, turning the room into a sanctuary of shadows and amber glows. As you grow, your nursery is a labyrinth of texture and sound. While children in the village below learn the feeling of mud and grass, you learn the grit of the mortar between the stones. Your fingers trace the marks left by the masons centuries before you were born. You feel the cold dampness of the lower walls and the sun-warmed surface of the upper battlements. The castle is not a static object to you. It is a living, breathing teacher. It teaches you about height, about weight, and about the permanence of things built to last 1,000 years. The rhythm of your infancy is set by the castle bells. They are the heartbeat of the stone. You hear them at dawn, at midday, and at dusk, their clear, metallic tones cutting through the thickest walls to find you. You learn to recognize the different voices of the fortress. There is the heavy, grinding sound of the portcullis being raised in the morning, a sound that vibrates through the very floor beneath your feet. There is the rhythmic clatter of horses on the cobblestones of the inner ward and the distant, melodic ring of the blacksmith's hammer. These are your lullabies. They tell you that the world is in order and that the gates are secure. Your baptism takes place in the castle chapel, a small and sturdy building tucked away in the most protected corner of the ward. The air here is different from the rest of the keep. It is thinner, colder, and smells deeply of beeswax and old parchment. You are held over a stone font that was carved when the foundation was first laid. The water is freezing, drawn from the deep well that reaches down into the bedrock. As the chaplain speaks the ancient words, his voice bounces off the low arches, creating a chorus of echoes that seem to come from the stones themselves. You are being claimed not just by your faith, but by the very earth upon which the castle stands. By the time you are old enough to walk, the courtyard becomes your universe. You do not think of miles or leagues. Your geography is vertical. You know the exact number of steps from the kitchen to the buttery. You know which flags in the courtyard hold puddles after a rain and which ones catch the afternoon sun. You watch the guards on the wall walk, their armor glinting like the scales of a great silver fish. To you, they are not soldiers of a distant lord. They are the familiar sentinels of your home, part of the landscape like the towers and the chimneys. You find yourself drawn to the gatehouse, the most formidable and heavily guarded part of the fortress. This is the mouth of the giant. You stand in the shadow of the great wooden doors, feeling the cool draft that pulls in from the outside world. Beyond the threshold lies the drawbridge and the winding road that leads into the forest. For a child born behind the curtain wall, that road is a thing of mystery. It is a ribbon that disappears into a world you can see but cannot touch. Your nurses tell you stories of the wild forests and the distant villages, but those places feel as remote as the moon. The reality is the weight of the ramparts and the safety of the gate. In the solar, you spend hours watching the light crawl across the rush-covered floor. These rushes, gathered from the riverbanks and mixed with sweet-smelling herbs like meadowsweet and mint, are your carpets. They release a fresh, green scent when you step on them, a small reminder of the natural world held captive within the stone. You watch the dust motes dancing in the beams of sunlight that slant through the narrow arrow loops. To a child, these slits of light are fascinating. They are the only way to see the horizon without climbing to the battlements. You press your face against the cool stone, squinting to see a patch of green field or a distant river. The world is a series of framed pictures, beautiful but distant. Your education is conducted in the high chambers, where the light is best and the drafts are fewest. You learn your letters from vellum pages that smell of calfskin and ink. You learn your history not as a series of dates, but as a family tree that is physically represented in the shields and tapestries hanging on the walls. You are surrounded by the faces of your ancestors, their stone effigies resting in the chapel below and their painted eyes watching you from the galleries. You realize early on that you are a temporary tenant in an eternal structure. Your life is a single stitch in a vast tapestry that began long before you and will continue long after you are gone. Imagine being 5 years old and playing hide and seek in the great hall. The scale of the room is staggering. The ceiling disappears into a forest of dark oak beams, and the hearth is large enough for you to stand inside. You hide behind the heavy wool tapestries, feeling the cold breath of the stone wall against your back. You hear the muffled voices of the servants preparing for the evening meal and the scratching of the hounds as they sleep by the fire. You feel a profound sense of belonging. This is not just a building. It is a community, an ecosystem where every person from the lowest scullery maid to the highest lord has a place and a purpose. As you grow older, the walls begin to feel less like a protection and more like a boundary. You notice the way the light changes during the seasons. In the winter, the castle pulls its limbs in tight. The fires roar in the hearths, and the world shrinks to the circle of warmth provided by the wood smoke. In the summer, the walls seem to expand, the courtyards filling with life and the smell of sun-warmed stone. You spend your days on the battlements, looking out at the world you will likely never inhabit. You see the farmers in the fields and the travelers on the road, and you realize that your life is different. You are a creature of the interior. Your safety is bought with your isolation. The castle is a place of constant maintenance. You learn that stone is not as static as it seems. It requires repointing, cleaning, and care. You watch the masons at work, their hammers and chisels singing the song of the fortress. They tell you stories of the stones they have laid and the ones their fathers laid before them. You realize that the castle is a multi-generational project. It is a work of art that is never truly finished. You begin to understand that your role is to be a steward of this place. You are the one who will keep the fires burning, the gates barred, and the memory of the stone alive. One evening, as the twilight turns the courtyard to a deep, bruised purple, you stand at the very top of the keep. The wind is strong here, carrying the scent of the coming rain and the distant, earthy smell of the woods. You look down at the roofs of the outbuildings, the smoke curling from the kitchen chimneys, and the guards pacing their rounds. You feel the immense weight of the masonry beneath your feet, thousands of tons of rock holding you up toward the sky. You realize that you have never known a night without the protection of these walls. You have never known a silence that was not textured by the echoes of the stone. The castle is your cradle, but it is also your identity. Your name is tied to the name of the fortress. Your history is written in its foundations. For the person who spends their entire life here, there is no separation between the self and the structure. You are a part of the stone, and the stone is a part of you. As you watch the first stars blink into existence over the battlements, you feel a deep, grounding peace. The gates are locked. The fires are banked. The world outside may be vast and unpredictable, but here, inside the stone cradle, you are exactly where you were born to be. You are home, and the walls will watch over you, as they have done since your very first breath. Your first memory is not of a wide blue sky or the rustle of a distant forest. It is the texture of the stone. Imagine you are very small, your hands pressed against a wall that seems to reach into the heavens themselves. The limestone is cool and slightly rough, smelling of damp earth and the faint, lingering scent of wood smoke that permeates every corner of this fortress. This is your cradle. For a child born within the keep, the castle is not a building. It is the entire world. Your horizon is not a line where the earth meets the sky, but a jagged silhouette of battlements and towers that frame your every waking moment. You learn to crawl across the flagstones of the solar, the private chamber high within the strongest tower. The floor is covered with a thick layer of dried rushes, and as you move, they crunch and whisper beneath you. They release the scent of meadowsweet and lavender, herbs gathered by the laundry maids to mask the more pungent smells of the castle. Your fingers find small treasures in the cracks between the stones, a lost button of bone, a smooth pebble carried in from the courtyard, or a stray thread of vibrant wool from your mother's embroidery frame. In these early months, the scale of the castle is incomprehensible. A single doorway is a monumental arch, and the shadows in the corners are deep, mysterious forests where the firelight from the hearth cannot reach. When you take your first unsteady steps, it is the wall that supports you. You reach out a tiny hand and find the solid, unyielding strength of the masonry. Unlike the world outside, which is subject to the whims of the wind and the changing of the seasons, the stone is a constant. It does not move. It does not change. It is a silent, gray guardian that has watched over your ancestors and now watches over you. You pull yourself up, your feet finding purchase on the uneven floor, and for the first time, you see the world from a new height. As you grow, your playground expands. You are no longer confined to the solar. You are allowed to venture into the inner ward, the heart of the castle's daily life. This is a place of perpetual motion and sound. You hear the rhythmic clanging of the blacksmith's hammer against the anvil, a steady heartbeat that echoes off the surrounding walls. You hear the barking of the hounds in the kennels and the shouting of the stable boys as they lead the great war horses out for exercise. To a child, these are not just noises. They are the songs of your home. You learn to navigate the inner ward by its smells, the sharp, acrid scent of the smithy, the sweet aroma of baking bread drifting from the kitchens, and the earthy, animal smell of the stables. The inner ward is a controlled environment, a fortress within a fortress. The high curtain walls act as a massive windbreak, turning a biting winter gale into a gentle breeze by the time it reaches the courtyard. You feel a sense of profound security here. The walls are so thick that the chaos of the outside world, the rumors of war, the threat of famine, and the dangers of the road, feel like stories from a distant land. You are safe within the stone embrace of the keep. The gatehouse, with its heavy iron portcullis and thick wooden doors, is the boundary of your universe. Beyond it lies a landscape you have only seen from the high windows, a tapestry of green and brown that seems beautiful but fundamentally alien. In this high-walled infancy, your geography is vertical. You do not measure distance in miles or leagues, but in steps and landings. You learn the secret language of the spiral staircases. You know that the steps are narrower at the center and wider at the wall, and you learn to hug the outer curve as you climb. You discover the hidden nooks in the thickness of the walls where you can hide from your nurse, curled up in a stone embrasure while you watch the sunlight crawl across the floor. You know the exact spot on the stairs where the wind whistles through a hidden gap, making a sound like a low flute. The people you encounter are as much a part of the castle as the stones themselves. You are not just the child of a lord or a servant. You are a child of the fortress. You spend your days under the watchful eyes of the entire community. The grizzled sentry on the wall walk tosses you a piece of dried fruit as you pass. The cook in the kitchen lets you scrape the bottom of the pottage pot with a crust of bread. The chaplain in the small, quiet chapel teaches you your first letters by tracing them in the dust on the altar. There is no anonymity here. Everyone knows your name, and everyone has a role in your upbringing. You are being shaped by the castle, just as the masons shaped the limestone. Your toys are reflections of the world you inhabit. You have a wooden sword carved by the carpenter, a small cloth doll stitched by the seamstress, and a set of stone marbles polished by years of play in the dirt of the courtyard. You do not play in the woods or by the river. You play in the shadow of the great tower. You organize mock battles with the other children, the sons and daughters of the craftsmen and the soldiers. In these games, the inner ward becomes a battlefield, and the stone benches become mountain ridges to be defended. You are learning the values of the castle, loyalty, duty, and the importance of holding your ground. One of the most profound lessons of a castle childhood is the understanding of time. In the outside world, time is marked by the cycle of the crops and the changing of the leaves. In the castle, time is marked by the bell. You learn to recognize the different tones of the chapel bell, the one that calls for morning prayer, the one that signals the midday meal, and the low, mournful toll that marks the closing of the gates at sunset. Your life is governed by these sounds. They provide a structure and a rhythm that is as solid as the walls around you. You never have to wonder what comes next. The castle has a plan for every hour of the day. As the years of your infancy pass, you begin to notice the details that others might overlook. You notice how the light changes color as it passes through the thick, greenish glass of the solar windows. You notice how the frost patterns on the stone walls in winter look like the delicate lace on your mother's gown. You notice the way the moss grows in the dampest corners of the courtyard, a vibrant green against the gray rock. These small observations are your connection to the world. You do not need the vastness of the forest when you have the infinite complexity of the stone. You also begin to understand the concept of legacy. You are told stories of the men and women who built these walls, of the strength it took to lift the massive beams of the roof and the patience it took to carve the intricate details of the chapel. You see their marks on the stones, the unique symbols left by the masons to identify their work. You realize that you are part of a long, unbroken chain of lives that have been contained within this circle of granite. The castle is a living history book, and every room you enter is a page that has already been written. You are just the latest character in a story that began centuries before you were born. By the time you reach the end of your childhood, the castle has become a part of your physical being. You walk with a particular gait, accustomed to the uneven flagstones and the steep stairs. Your lungs are accustomed to the scent of wood smoke and the cool, damp air of the lower halls. Your eyes are sharp, trained to find the smallest movement on the distant horizon from the high battlements. You do not feel confined. To you, the walls are not a cage, but a shield. The outside world, with its lack of boundaries and its unpredictable nature, seems daunting and chaotic. Here, everything has a place. Everything has a purpose. You stand in the center of the inner ward as the sun begins to set. The long shadows of the towers stretch across the courtyard, touching the well, the forge, and the stables. The air is cooling, and the first stars are beginning to appear in the narrow strip of sky above the ramparts. You feel a deep sense of belonging. This is your foundation. This is the place that has shaped your mind and your spirit. As the heavy iron gates are pulled shut and the great oak bar is slid into place, you do not feel trapped. You feel home. The world outside may fade into darkness, but here, within the high walls of your infancy, the lights are being lit, the fires are being stoked, and the life of the castle continues its steady, ancient pulse. You are a child of the stone, and the stones will watch over you, as they have done since your very first breath. Ends. Imagine you are 7 years old. The world you have known until this moment has been soft, centered around the warm, dim light of the nursery and the gentle voices of mothers and nursemaids. But today, that world has ended. You have been brought to the center of the fortress, the place where the stone feels most solid and the shadows stretch the longest. You are no longer just a child of the household. You are a page. Your life, which was once a series of games played in the grassy corners of the inner ward, is now a strictly measured path of service. You stand at the entrance to the great hall, your new wool tunic feeling heavy and slightly scratchy against your skin. This room, which once seemed like a cavernous and distant place of noise, is now your classroom and your theater. You step onto the rushes that cover the stone floor. They are fresh today, and as your small leather shoes sink into them, they release the bright, sharp scent of meadowsweet and mint. This is the first thing you learn about the castle. Its smells are laid. Beneath the fragrance of the herbs is the old, damp smell of the stone, and beneath that, the lingering memory of wood smoke and roasted meat from the night before. You look up, and for a moment, the sheer scale of the hall makes your head swim. The timber beams of the roof are lost in a haze of smoke and shadow, and the high windows admit only thin, slanted pillars of dusty light. To a child of 7, this is not a room. It is a cathedral of power. Your day begins long before the sun has cleared the battlements. You are woken by the soft, rhythmic clanging of the chapel bell, a sound that cuts through the cold air of the sleeping chamber you share with the other pages. You roll off your straw pallet, the air biting at your skin. There is no fire in this room. The warmth is something you must earn through movement. You follow the older boys down the narrow, winding stairs, your hand sliding along the cold stone of the newel post. You learn the geometry of the castle through your feet and your fingertips. You know exactly which step is uneven and which turn in the staircase holds a pocket of stagnant, freezing air. Your first duty is simple but heavy. You are a carrier of water. You go to the well in the courtyard, the same well that serves the entire community. The wooden bucket is almost as large as your torso, and when it is full, it pulls at your shoulders with a relentless, aching weight. You carry this water up to the private chambers of the Lord and Lady. You learn to move with a steady, quiet pace, ensuring that not a drop of the precious liquid spills onto the stone. You are learning the value of silence. In a castle, a servant who is not heard is a servant who is successful. You enter the solar, the scent of expensive beeswax candles and lavender filling your nose. You set the silver basin down on a carved stand, watching as the steam rises into the cool morning air. This is your first glimpse into the life you are meant to follow, a world of refinement held within a shell of iron and rock. By midday, the great hall has transformed into a hive of activity. This is where your education truly takes place. You are not taught from books, but through the observation of ritual. You watch the squire as he tends to the Lord's armor. You see the way he handles the steel, with a mixture of reverence and practical care. You hear the rhythmic scrape of the sharpening stone and the clink of the metal buckles. This is the music of your future. You are taught how to stand, how to bow, and how to speak only when spoken to. Your voice must be like the castle itself, clear, strong, and controlled. One of your primary tasks is learning the art of service at the table. To the modern mind, this might seem like a simple chore, but here, it is a complex dance. You are taught how to hold a heavy silver ewer of wine, your arm steady even as the muscle begins to tremble. You learn the hierarchy of the room by where you place the cups. The lord and lady on the raised dais receive the finest vintage, served with a deep bow and a steady hand. Then you move down to the knights and the squires at the long trestle tables. You learn to read the moods of the room. You can tell by the tone of the voices and the way the shadows flicker against the tapestries whether the mood is one of celebration or tension. You are a silent witness to history. From your position near the sideboard, you hear the discussions of land, of war, and of alliances. You see the messengers arrive, their cloaks splattered with the mud of distant roads, bringing news that will change the rhythm of the castle for months to come. You are learning that the stone walls are not just for protection. They are the boundaries of a political universe. The Great Hall is the heart of this universe, and you are its smallest, most observant inhabitant. But life as a page is not entirely confined to the interior. In the afternoons, you are sent into the inner ward for a different kind of training. This is the school of the blade and the wing. You are given a wooden sword, a heavy, blunt thing that feels clumsy in your small hand. You practice the basic strikes against a straw man, the rhythmic thud of the wood against the target echoing off the high stone walls. You learn the importance of balance and the necessity of endurance. The knights watch from the gallery above, their eyes sharp and critical. You are being forged, just as the blacksmith in the forge across the courtyard forges the iron. You are also introduced to the mews. The smell here is sharp and wild, a mixture of feathers, raw meat, and the pungent scent of the birds of prey. You watch the falconer as he tends to the hawks. You learn the patience required to sit for hours with a hooded bird on your fist, feeling the grip of its talons through the thick leather glove. You are taught to respect the wildness of the creatures, a reminder that even within the ordered world of the castle, the laws of nature still apply. The hawks are an extension of the Lord's power, and to care for them is to care for the prestige of the house. As the evening falls, the great hall changes again. The torches are lit, their orange flames casting long, dancing shadows that reach toward the high ceiling. The central hearth is stoked until it roars, the heat of physical presence that pushes back the winter chill. This is the time of the feast, and your duties are at their peak. You move between the tables, carrying platters of roasted venison, thick pottage, and rounds of coarse bread. The air is thick with the scent of spices, cinnamon, ginger, and pepper, expensive treasures that have traveled across the world to reach this table. You listen to the music of the minstrels, the high, clear notes of the lute and the mournful whistle of the pipe. The stories they tell are of ancient heroes and impossible quests, legends that seem to come alive in the flickering light. You realize that you are part of this story. One day, you will be the squire tending the armor. One day, you will be the knight sitting at the table. The castle is a ladder, and you are currently on its lowest rung, but the stone beneath your feet is the same stone that supports the Lord himself. When the meal is finished and the tables are cleared, a different kind of quiet settles over the hall. The rushes are swept, the dogs find their places near the dying embers of the fire, and the heavy doors are bolted for the night. You return to your shared chamber, your body aching from the day of labor. You lie down on your straw pallet, the thin wool blanket providing only a meager defense against the cold. You listen to the breathing of the other pages, a rhythmic, collective sound that reminds you that you are not alone in this journey. You look toward the narrow window slit, where a single star is visible in the dark patch of the sky. You are 7, or perhaps 8 now, and the world outside the walls feels like a dream. Your reality is the texture of the limestone, the weight of the water bucket, and the rules of the Great Hall. You are coming of age in a world of iron and tradition. You are being shaped by the castle, your character being built block by block, just as the walls were built by the masons. You feel a sense of pride in your service, a realization that even the smallest task contributes to the strength of the whole. As you drift towards sleep, the sounds of the castle continue. You hear the steady tread of the sentry on the wall walk above your head, his boots clicking against the stone. You hear the creak of the timber beams as the building settles into the night. You are safe. You are part of something enduring. The path of the page is a long one, filled with years of repetition and discipline, but it is a path that leads toward the light of knighthood. You close your eyes, the scent of the wood smoke still in your hair, and let the stone fortress hold you in its ancient, protective embrace. You are home, and your journey has only just begun. Ends. You leave the quiet, sunlit galleries of the keep behind and begin your descent. The air changes with every step you take down the narrow, damp stairs. The smell of lavender and beeswax fades, replaced by a thick, heavy blanket of humidity, wood smoke, and the pungent aroma of rendered fat. You are moving away from the world of soft velvet and quiet prayers, descending into the pulsating, roaring engine of the castle. For every person who lives in the light of the high windows, there are dozens who live their entire lives in the shadows of the lower depths. This is the realm of the scullery and the great kitchens. To the lord in his solar, this place is merely a source of sustenance, but to you, it is your entire world. You step into the great kitchen, and the sheer scale of the heat is the first thing that hits you. It is a physical force, a wall of warmth that makes the air shimmer. Here, the ceilings are high and vaulted, but they are blackened with soot that has accumulated over decades. Great hearths, wide enough to roast a whole ox, dominate the walls. These fires are never allowed to die. They are the eternal flame of the fortress. You watch a turnspit boy, a child no older than 8 or 9, sitting on a small wooden stool near the edge of the fire. His face is flushed a deep, painful red, and his eyes are fixed on the heavy iron rod he must turn with a steady, rhythmic motion. His life is measured in the rotations of meat over the coals. He is the smallest cog in a massive machine, a boy who will grow up in the heat of this room, knowing the scent of roasting flesh better than the smell of the forest. The noise is a constant, overwhelming roar. You hear the rhythmic thud of heavy cleavers against massive sections of oak. You hear the bubbling of iron cauldrons, each one large enough to hold a grown man, filled with thick pottage and stews that simmer for days. There is the clatter of copper pans, the shouting of the master cook, and the constant scuffle of feet over the stone floors. The floors here are not covered in fresh rushes. They are slick with a mixture of spilled broth, water, and sand used to scrub away the grease. You must walk carefully, feeling the grit beneath your boots, a constant reminder of the labor required to keep this stone universe clean. Move toward the back of the kitchen, through a low, arched doorway into the scullery. This is the domain of the unseen and the unthanked. Here, the heat of the fire is replaced by a bone-deep dampness. The air is thick with steam and the sharp, acrid scent of lye. You see the scullions, the lowest of the low, their hands perpetually red and chapped from the cold water and the harsh soaps. They are bent over massive stone troughs, scrubbing away the remains of the Lord's feast. To a scullion, the castle is not a place of chivalry or romance. It is a place of endless piles of ceramic and wood. They see the lives of the nobility only through the scraps left behind on the trenches. They know what the lady likes to eat by the way she leaves the crusts of her bread, yet they may never look her in the eye for as long as they live. The concept of being below the salt is not just a social metaphor here. It is a physical reality that defines every moment of your existence. In the Great Hall, the massive silver salt cellar marks the boundary between the world of the rulers and the world of the ruled. To live below the salt is to occupy a space of perpetual service. You inhabit the narrow, winding corridors that run like veins behind the thick masonry. You move through the castle like a shadow, emerging only to deliver a tray or clear a table before retreating back into the darkness. Your geography of the castle is different from the Lord's. He knows the view from the battlements, but you know the shortcut from the buttery to the cellar. You know which stone in the wall is always damp and which door has a latch that sticks. Life in the scullery is a life of constant, repetitive motion. You watch a girl sitting in the corner, her fingers moving with a speed that is almost hypnotic as she plucks the feathers from a pile of game birds. The air around her is filled with floating down, looking like a strange, indoor snowstorm. She does not look up as you pass. Her world is the texture of the feathers and the weight of the bird in her hands. She will do this for hours, until the sun goes down and the only light comes from a single, sputtering tallow candle. Her work is the invisible foundation of the grand meals served upstairs. Without her, the high table would be empty, yet she is as much a part of the castle's machinery as the stones themselves. As you walk through the lower levels, you realize that privacy is a concept that does not exist for the people of the scullery. They do not have private chambers or beds with heavy curtains. When the work is finally done and the fires are banked for the night, they sleep where they can. You see a row of straw pallets tucked under the preparation tables, still warm from the heat of the day. A cook might sleep on a bench near the hearth, wrapped in a coarse wool blanket. They live in a state of perpetual community, a shared existence defined by shared labor. This creates a bond that is as strong as any oath of fealty. In the quiet hours of the night, when the only sound is the dripping of water in the scullery, these people share stories and secrets that never reach the ears of the Lord. The sensory world of the lower castle is one of extremes. It is the searing heat of the oven and the freezing cold of the larder. It is the overwhelming smell of 100 different ingredients being prepared at once and the neutral, earthy smell of the storage cellars. You move into the larder, where the air is still and cool. Here, the castle's wealth is measured in barrels of salted fish, sacks of grain, and wheels of cheese as hard as rock. You see the hooks in the ceiling where the hams are hung to cure, their dark shapes looking like sleeping bats in the dim light. This is the fortress of survival. For the people who live here, security is found in a full barrel of salt and a well-stocked granary. You walk past the laundry, where the smell of wood ash and boiling water fills the air. The women here move in a cloud of white steam, their faces obscured as they stir massive vats of linen with long wooden poles. This is a world of heavy, sodden fabric and the rhythmic sound of beating paddles. They are the ones who transform the grime of the world into the pristine white shirts worn by the knights. Their work is a never-ending battle against the dust and soot of the castle itself. Like the scullions, they see the secrets of the household in the stains on the cloth. They know who has been hunting and who has been ill. They hold the intimate history of the residents in their hands every single day. For a person born into this life of service, the castle is both a protector and a taskmaster. It provides a safety that few in the outside world can imagine. Within these walls, you are safe from the bandits on the road and the uncertainty of the harvest. You will always have a roof over your head and a portion of pottage in your bowl. But the price of this security is a life of constant demand. The castle is a hungry beast that must be fed and cleaned without pause. There are no holidays in the scullery. The bread must be baked every morning, and the fires must be stoked every night. The rhythm of your life is the rhythm of the castle's needs. As you stand in the center of the lower ward, looking up at the high, imposing towers, you feel the weight of the social hierarchy. The stone walls that protect you also serve to keep you in your place. You are a part of the shadows. You are the grease on the axle, the soot on the beam, and the water in the trough. But there is a pride to be found in this labor. The people of the scullery know that the castle cannot stand without them. They are the ones who keep the spirit of the place alive. They are the ones who transform the raw materials of the earth into the refined life of the keep. You watch as a group of servants carries a massive, steaming dish toward the great hall. They move with a practiced coordination, navigating the narrow stairs and the crowded passages with ease. They are entering the world of the light, but they will not stay there long. They will deliver their burden and return to the shadows, back to the warmth of the kitchen and the familiar grit of the scullery. Their lives are a series of cycles, of preparation and cleaning, of heat and cold. As the evening settles and the work begins to slow, the people of the scullery gather around the dying embers of the hearth. This is their time. The noise of the day has faded into a low murmur. They share a jug of thin ale and the remains of the day's bread. In the orange glow of the coals, their faces are softened, the lines of exhaustion momentarily forgotten. They are the residents of the shadows, the people who live their entire lives below the salt, and in this moment, they are the true heart of the fortress. You realize that the story of the castle is not just a story of kings and battles. It is a story written in the calloused hands of the scullions and the soot-stained faces of the turnspit boys. It is a story of survival in the dark, of community in the heat, and of a life lived entirely within the boundaries of service. You look one last time at the flickering light of the kitchen fires before you begin your climb back toward the upper world. The shadows of the scullery remain behind you, a hidden and vital universe that breathes with the slow, heavy pulse of the stone itself. The castle is a place of many lives, but none are more enduring or more essential than the ones lived in the shadows below the salt. You leave the warmth of the central hearth behind, the orange light of the fire fading into a dim, ghostly gray as you move toward the farthest corner of the inner ward. The sounds of the castle, the barking dogs, the clatter of the kitchen, and the rhythmic chanting from the chapel, begin to lose their clarity. They become a muffled, distant memory as you approach a small, heavy door set deep into the base of the tallest tower. This door is not like the others. It is not made of polished oak or decorated with swirling ironwork. It is thick, rough, and stained with the dampness of centuries. There is no window here. There is only a single, massive iron bolt that slides back with a sharp, echoing scream of metal against metal. You step through and begin a descent that takes you away from the world of light and into the very roots of the mountain. The air changes immediately. It is no longer filled with the scent of wood smoke or herbs. Instead, it is heavy, cold, and smells of wet stone, stagnant water, and the sharp, mineral tang of saltpeter. The walls are close here, so narrow that your shoulders occasionally brush against the rough granite. You can feel the moisture on the stones, a slick, cold film that clings to your skin. Your torch flickers violently in the damp draft, casting long, jumping shadows that seem to pull at your heels. You are descending beneath the foundations, beneath the crypts, and beneath the reach of the sun. You are entering the realm of the forgotten. As you reach the bottom of the spiral stairs, you find yourself in a low, vaulted chamber. The ceiling is so heavy with the weight of the fortress above that it feels as though the stone is pressing down on your chest. In the center of the floor, there is a single, circular opening. It is a hole in the earth, barely wide enough for a man to pass through, surrounded by a rim of jagged, unpainted rock. This is the mouth of the oubliette. The word itself comes from a language of forgetting, a place designed for those the world no longer wishes to see. You lean over the edge, holding your torch high, and look down into the void. The light of your flame struggles to penetrate the darkness. For a moment, there is nothing but a deep, absolute blackness that seems to swallow the fire. But then, as your eyes adjust, you see the bottom. It is 20 feet below, a small, circular floor of cold, damp earth and scattered stones. There are no stairs leading down. There is no door at the bottom. The only way in or out is through this single opening above your head. This is a bottle dungeon, shaped like the very vessels used in the kitchens, with a narrow neck and a wide, inescapable base. For the people who lived their entire lives inside this hole, the square of light above was their only connection to the universe. Imagine being lowered into this space, the rope slipping through your hands until your feet touch the cold ground. You hear the grate slide into place above you, a heavy lattice of iron that cuts the world into small, unreachable squares. The silence that follows is not peaceful. It is a thick, ringing silence that vibrates with the weight of the thousands of tons of stone above you. You are a resident of the castle, just like the lord in his solar or the cook in the kitchen, but your reality is one of total deprivation. Your world has shrunk to a circle of stone 10 feet wide. You walk to the wall of your cell and run your hand over the surface. The stone is not smooth like the walls of the great hall. It is jagged and raw, still bearing the marks of the heavy iron picks that carved it out of the bedrock. In the dim light filtering from above, you can see where others have left their mark. There are faint, shallow grooves in the rock, scratched by fingernails or small stones. They are tally marks, rows upon rows of them, representing days, months, and years lived in the dark. Some of these marks are so old they have been smoothed over by the constant weeping of the walls. These are the records of lives that the castle has slowly absorbed. The concept of time in the oubliette is different than anywhere else in the fortress. Above, the day is marked by the movement of the sun across the courtyard and the ringing of the chapel bells. Here, the only indicator of time is the arrival of the bucket. Once a day, or perhaps less often depending on the whims of the gala, a wooden bucket is lowered through the hole on a long, fraying rope. It contains a loaf of hard, grey bread and a jug of stale water. The sound of the winch creaking far above becomes the most important sound in your existence. It is the heartbeat of your world, a signal that you have not yet been entirely erased. You sit on the damp floor, leaning your back against the cold stone. The earth beneath you is never dry. It holds the moisture of the surrounding land, a slow and constant seepage that turns the dust into a thin, grey mud. Your clothes, once thick wool or linen, have become heavy and damp, smelling of the earth and the dark. You learn to listen to the castle in a way that no one else can. You hear the deep, rhythmic thud of horses galloping over the drawbridge far above, a vibration that travels through the bedrock and into your very bones. You hear the muffled roar of the wind during a winter storm, a sound like a distant ocean crashing against the towers. You are part of the castle's foundation, a living witness to the events you will never see. In the oubliette, your senses become incredibly sharp. In the total darkness of the night, when even the faint grey light from the grate is gone, you can hear the heartbeat of the fortress. You hear the scratching of a rat in the mortar, the slow drip of water from a stalactite forming in the corner, and the shifting of the earth as the massive weight of the keep settles into the ground. You become intimately familiar with the texture of every stone in your reach. You know which one has a small fossil embedded in it and which one has a crack that holds a pocket of freezing air. This is your geography. Your map is not of kingdoms or counties, but of the individual grains of limestone that surround you. For many who lived their lives here, the psychological weight was greater than the physical cold. To be in an oubliette was to be socially dead while your heart was still beating. You could hear the voices of the guards laughing in the chamber above, or the distant music of a lute during a feast in the hall, but you could never join them. You were a ghost inhabiting a stone body. You watch the square of light above you as it changes from the pale blue of morning to the deep gold of afternoon. You watch a single spider spin a web across the iron bars of the grate, a delicate and intricate work of life in a place defined by stasis. Sometimes, a resident of the oubliette might find a strange kind of peace in the stones. There is a profound certainty here. The walls will never move. The dark will always return. The castle will continue to stand, unyielding and eternal. You realize that you are the most permanent resident of all. The Lord may go to war, the servants may leave for the village, and the chaplains may be called to other churches, but you remain. You are the anchor of the fortress, held in place by the sheer mass of the history above you. You are the shadow that gives the light of the upper rooms its meaning. You stand up and look toward the opening again. You see the shadow of a guard pass over the grate, a brief flicker that momentarily blocks the light. You hear the clink of his mail and the rhythmic thud of his spear against the stone. He does not look down. To him, this hole in the floor is just a feature of the architecture, a dark space to be avoided or ignored. He does not think of the person living in the dark beneath his feet. You are a part of the castle that the castle itself has forgotten. The dampness of the cell begins to seep into your joints, a dull and persistent ache that never truly leaves. You realize that your body is slowly becoming like the stone. Your skin is pale and cool, your movements are slow and deliberate, and your thoughts have taken on the heavy, unmoving quality of the granite. You are being reclaimed by the earth. Every breath you take is filled with the dust of the mountain. You are not just living in the castle. You are becoming the castle. As the light from the grate begins to fade into the deep violet of twilight, you prepare for the long night. There are no candles here, no hearths to warm the air. You have only the residual heat of your own body and the heavy silence of the deep earth. You lie down on the damp ground, pulling your thin cloak around you. You close your eyes, and the boundary between your mind and the stone seems to dissolve. You dream of the great hall, of the smell of roasting meat and the sound of laughter, but the dreams feel thin and distant, like stories told to you by someone you no longer remember. The oubliette is the final expression of the castle's power. It is the place where the stone's ability to protect becomes an ability to entomb. It is a reminder that the same walls that keep the enemy out also keep the inhabitant in. As you drift toward sleep, you feel the immense pressure of the towers above you, a reassuring and terrifying weight that holds you in place. You are home, in the deepest, darkest sense of the word. You are a permanent resident of the Lock and Key, a soul held in a bottle of bone and rock. The night is absolute, the stone is cold, and the castle continues its long, silent watch over the world, while you remain forever tucked away in its deepest, most secret pocket. The silence is your shroud, the rock is your bed, and the darkness is your only companion in the eternal heart of the fortress. Ends. You step away from the drafty corridors and the bustling noise of the inner ward. You are seeking a different kind of sanctuary, one that is not built for defense against arrows but for defense against the chaos of the soul. You approach a heavy door made of silver gray oak, its iron hinges shaped like delicate vines. As you push it open, the sound of the castle fades into a distant memory. The air here is instantly cooler and carries a weight that the other rooms do not possess. It is the scent of 1,000 years of prayer. It is the smell of cold limestone, old beeswax, and the faint, sweet trace of frankincense that lingers in the high, vaulted shadows. You have entered the chapel, the spiritual heart of the fortress, a place where the boundaries of the world seem to thin and vanish. You find your feet landing on a floor of solid stone slabs. They are not like the rough cobblestones of the courtyard or the packed earth of the stables. These have been polished to a dull shine by the knees and the shuffling feet of thousands who came before you. You walk toward the center of the nave, and the acoustics of the space embrace you. Every breath you take is amplified, a soft and rhythmic sound that reminds you of your own presence in this quiet place. The walls here are thick, yet they seem to hold a certain lightness. There are colorful frescoes painted onto the plaster, depicting saints with golden halos and scenes of quiet, celestial gardens. For a person who will never leave the castle, these paintings are their primary window into a divine world, a vision of a landscape far more beautiful than the rugged hills outside. For a person living their entire life inside this circle of granite, the concept of time is not dictated by the movement of the sun alone. It is dictated by the sound of the chapel bell. You hear it now, a clear and high tone that cuts through the thick stone walls and the morning mist. It is the signal for matins, the first prayers of the day that happen while the rest of the world is still shrouded in the deep blue of the night. You imagine the chaplain rising from his small, cold cell, his robes rustling against the stones as he makes his way to the altar. He is the guardian of the castle's spirit. While the constable watches the gates and the guards watch the horizon, the chaplain watches the souls of every man, woman, and child within these walls. You sit on a wooden bench, the oak hard and cold beneath you. You realize that this is the one place where the castle feels connected to the vast world beyond the horizon. When the community gathers here, they are not just praying for their own safety. They are praying for the world they can only see through narrow arrow slits. They pray for the king in his distant city. They pray for the harvest in the valley below. They pray for the sailors on the unpredictable seas and the travelers on the lonely roads. Inside this stone stronghold, the chapel is the bridge. It is the place where the isolated world of the castle reaches out to touch the infinite. You step away from the drafty corridors and the bustling noise of the inner ward. You are seeking a different kind of sanctuary, one that is not built for defense against arrows but for defense against the chaos of the soul. You approach a heavy door made of silver gray oak, its iron hinges shaped like delicate vines. As you push it open, the sound of the castle fades into a distant memory. The air here is instantly cooler and carries a weight that the other rooms do not possess. It is the scent of 1,000 years of prayer. It is the smell of cold limestone, old beeswax, and the faint, sweet trace of frankincense that lingers in the high, vaulted shadows. You have entered the chapel, the spiritual heart of the fortress, a place where the boundaries of the world seem to thin and vanish. You find your feet landing on a floor of solid stone slabs. They are not like the rough cobblestones of the courtyard or the packed earth of the stables. These have been polished to a dull shine by the knees and the shuffling feet of thousands who came before you. You walk toward the center of the nave, and the acoustics of the space embrace you. Every breath you take is amplified, a soft and rhythmic sound that reminds you of your own presence in this quiet place. The walls here are thick, yet they seem to hold a certain lightness. There are colorful frescoes painted onto the plaster, depicting saints with golden halos and scenes of quiet, celestial gardens. For a person who will never leave the castle, these paintings are their primary window into a divine world, a vision of a landscape far more beautiful than the rugged hills outside. For a person living their entire life inside this circle of granite, the concept of time is not dictated by the movement of the sun alone. It is dictated by the sound of the chapel bell. You hear it now, a clear and high tone that cuts through the thick stone walls and the morning mist. It is the signal for matins, the first prayers of the day that happen while the rest of the world is still shrouded in the deep blue of the night. You imagine the chaplain rising from his small, cold cell, his robes rustling against the stones as he makes his way to the altar. He is the guardian of the castle's spirit. While the constable watches the gates and the guards watch the horizon, the chaplain watches the souls of every man, woman, and child within these walls. You sit on a wooden bench, the oak hard and cold beneath you. You realize that this is the one place where the castle feels connected to the vast world beyond the horizon. When the community gathers here, they are not just praying for their own safety. They are praying for the world they can only see through narrow arrow slits. They pray for the king in his distant city. They pray for the harvest in the valley below. They pray for the sailors on the unpredictable seas and the travelers on the lonely roads. Inside this stone stronghold, the chapel is the bridge. It is the place where the isolated world of the castle reaches out to touch the infinite. You look toward the altar, where the light of a dozen beeswax candles creates a warm and golden glow. The flame is steady, undisturbed by the winds that howl against the battlements outside. This steady light is a symbol of the permanence of the castle's faith. You watch as a young page kneels before the altar, his head bowed in a moment of quiet reflection. In this space, the hierarchy of the castle is momentarily softened. The lord and the servant both kneel on the same cold stone. They both look toward the same flickering light. In the eyes of the chapel, every person who lives their life inside these walls is part of a single, spiritual family. Imagine the sound of the chanting. It is a low and melodic drone that seems to rise from the very stones themselves. The voices of the choir, small and humble as they may be, fill the vaulted ceiling and echo back down to you. It is a rhythmic music, a sequence of sounds that has remained unchanged for generations. This music is the soundtrack of your existence. You heard it when you were a child being carried to the font for your baptism. You will hear it throughout your life at every wedding and every feast day. And one day, it will be the last sound that accompanies you as you are laid to rest. The chapel is the keeper of your story, from your first breath to your final hour. You look down at your feet and notice a carved name. You are standing on a tomb. In the castle chapel, the living and the dead share the same space. You see the alabaster effigy of a knight, his stone hands joined in eternal prayer. His armor is rendered in perfect detail, but his face is peaceful and still. He lived his life within these walls, and he will remain here as long as the castle stands. This is the promise of the stronghold. It is a place where you belong, even after your breath has left you. You feel a sense of profound continuity. You are not just a visitor or a passing shadow. You are a link in a chain that stretches back centuries. The stone beneath you holds the bones of your ancestors, and one day, it will hold yours as well. The chapel also serves as a refuge in times of great fear. Imagine the castle under a long siege. The gates are barred and the walls are being hammered by stone projectiles. The air in the courtyard is filled with the smell of smoke and the shouting of men. But inside the chapel, the quiet remains. The thick walls drown out the sounds of the conflict, creating a pocket of peace in the middle of a storm. You see the women and children gathered here, seeking comfort in the familiar prayers and the steady glow of the candles. The chapel provides the spiritual strength that allows the inhabitants to endure. It is a fortress within a fortress, a place where the will to survive is reinforced by the belief in something greater than the stone itself. As you sit in the silence, you notice the sensory details of the altar. There is a heavy book with pages of thick parchment, its edges gilded with gold that catches the light. The chaplain turns the pages with slow and deliberate movements, the sound of the vellum a sharp and crisp contrast to the low hum of the room. There is a silver chalice, its surface polished to a mirror-like shine, reflecting the flickering flames and the dark shadows of the vaulting. These objects are the treasures of the castle, more valuable than the swords in the army because they represent the enduring hope of the people. The light begins to shift as the sun moves across the sky. You watch as a beam of light, colored a deep and vibrant red by a small pane of stained glass, crawls across the stone floor. It moves slowly, marking the passage of the hours. This is the only clock you need. You know that when the light reaches the base of the pillar, it is time for the afternoon prayers. You know that when the light fades from the ceiling, the day is coming to an end. This rhythm is comforting. It provides a structure to a life that could otherwise feel confined. The walls are not a prison when they are filled with the music of the hours and the beauty of the light. You think about the chaplain once more. He is a man who has likely spent his entire adult life within this small stone room. He knows every crack in the plaster and every knot in the wood of the benches. He has heard the confessions of the Lord and the whispered fears of the scullery maid. He is the repository of the castle's secrets. He provides the counsel that keeps the household together, reminding everyone from the highest to the lowest that they are part of a larger purpose. His presence is a constant, a steady and reassuring figure who connects the physical labor of the castle to its spiritual goals. As the afternoon wanes, the chapel grows darker and more mysterious. The shadows in the corners seem to lengthen and deepen, hiding the frescoes and the tombs. The single candle on the altar becomes the focal point of the entire world. You feel a sense of profound stillness. The world outside, with its forests and its wars and its distant cities, feels like a dream. The only reality is the weight of the stone, the scent of the wax, and the quiet peace of the sanctuary. You realize that for many who lived their entire lives here, this was enough. They did not need to see the ocean or the mountains because they found the entire universe within these four walls. You rise from the bench, your limbs feeling heavy and relaxed. You walk back toward the door, taking care to move quietly so as not to disturb the silence. You reach out and touch the holy water font, a bowl of carved stone that is cool and smooth to the touch. You make a small sign of respect and step back out into the corridor. The transition is sharp. The sounds of the castle return, the clanking of metal and the shouting of orders. But the peace of the chapel stays with you, a quiet kernel of solace that you carry back into the world of stone and iron. You walk through the inner ward, looking up at the high towers that reach for the clouds. You see them differently now. They are not just symbols of military might or aristocratic pride. They are the containers for a life of the spirit. The castle is a machine for survival, yes, but it is also a vessel for faith. Within its walls, the community finds the strength to face the darkness of the winter and the uncertainty of the future. The chapel is the anchor that holds everything in place, a silent and enduring vow of protection that spans the generations. As the sun sets and the first stars begin to appear over the battlements, the bell rings once more for the evening prayers of Compline. It is a slow and solemn sound, a signal that the day is over and the night is beginning. You watch as the people of the castle move toward the chapel door, their shadows long and thin on the flagstones. They are going to find their peace before they find their rest. They are going to the one place where the walls do not feel like a boundary, but like a blessing. You stand for a moment in the courtyard, listening to the final echoes of the bell, feeling the deep and solid permanence of the stone beneath your feet. The chapel is silent once more, but its spirit remains, a steady and unwavering light in the heart of the stronghold. You are home, and you are watched over. The cycle of the day is complete, and the fortress is at peace. Imagine you are climbing away from the heavy, savory steam of the kitchen and the echoing laughter of the great hall. Your feet find the familiar spiral of the stone steps, and with every turn, the air grows lighter, infused with the delicate scent of dried rose petals and the clean, sharp smell of expensive beeswax candles. You are entering the sola, the sanctuary of the castle, where the hard edges of military life are softened by the grace of social ritual. This is the stage where the future of the lineage is negotiated, where the bloodlines that will inhabit these walls for centuries to come are carefully and purposefully entwined. To live your entire life inside a castle is to understand that your heart is not merely your own. It is a piece of the foundation, a weight to be placed with intention to ensure the structure never falters. You push open the heavy oak door and the atmosphere of the fortress shifts. The sola is a world of fabric and firelight. While the rest of the castle is defined by the gray permanence of stone, this room is defined by the vibrant, shifting textures of wealth and domesticity. The walls are almost entirely hidden by massive tapestries, their thick wool fibers acting as a barrier against the chill of the masonry. You see scenes of forest hunts and quiet gardens woven in deep indigos and rich matters. These woven stories provide a backdrop for the very real stories unfolding in the room. You walk across the floor, and instead of the crunch of dry rushes, you feel the soft give of a woven rug, a rare and precious object that speaks of the status of this chamber. In the center of the room, near the largest window, you see the window seat. This is the heart of the sola. It is a deep alcove carved directly into the thickness of the wall, cushioned with velvet pillows and illuminated by the pale, afternoon light. Here, the ritual of courtship takes place. You notice a young man and a young woman sitting across from one another. They are not alone. Privacy in a castle is a relative concept, especially when it comes to the business of marriage. Scattered throughout the room are the ladies in waiting, their heads bowed over embroidery frames, their needles making a soft, rhythmic popping sound as they pull silk thread through taut linen. They are the audience for this performance, the silent witnesses who ensure that every word and every glance remains within the bounds of propriety. You watch the way the light catches the fine details of their clothing. Courtship is a visual language. The young woman wears a gown of heavy velvet, the sleeves so long they brush against the cushions. Her hair is bound in a net of gold thread, and her skin is pale, a sign of her life spent within the sheltered upper rooms of the keep. The young man is equally ornate, his tunic embroidered with the heraldry of his house. They are two pillars being measured against one another to see if they can support the weight of a shared future. You realize that for those who live their entire lives here, marriage is not just a union of people, but a union of lands, titles, and stone. The castle requires an heir, and the sola is the place where that necessity is dressed in the language of romance. The conversation is quiet, a low murmur that is almost lost in the crackle of the hearth. They speak of distant cousins, of the health of the hounds, and of the poems they have memorized. This is the influence of courtly love, the idealized version of romance that filters through the castle in the songs of traveling minstrels. You hear the faint, melodic plucking of a lute in the corner of the room, where a page is practicing a tune. The music provides a thin veil of beauty over what is essentially a legal and political negotiation. While they discuss the beauty of the garden, the parents and stewards are likely in the room below, discussing dowries, border disputes, and the number of knights each house can bring to a campaign. You find a place to sit near a pillar, feeling the cool stone against your back as you observe the scene. The scale of the castle is present even here. You look up at the rafters, where the dark oak beams are carved with the symbols of the family. These trees were felled generations ago to provide the roof for this very room. You think about the people who sat in this same window seat 100 years before. They used the same words, wore similar fabrics, and felt the same pressure of expectation. To live in a castle is to be part of a long, unbroken line. Your individual desires are secondary to the survival of the house. You see this reflected in the young woman's eyes. She is not just a girl, she is a vessel for the future of the fortress. As the sun begins to set, the light in the sola turns to a deep, honeyed gold. This is the hour when the room is at its most beautiful. The shadows of the window mullions stretch long and thin across the floor, tracking the passage of time. You notice a gift being exchanged. It is a small thing, perhaps a silk ribbon or a pair of embroidered gloves, but it is a symbol of a contract being formed. Every gift is a weight on the scale. To accept it is to accept a role in the ongoing story of the castle. You feel the gravity of the moment. Inside these walls, there are no small decisions. Everything you do, everyone you marry, and every child you bear becomes a part of the masonry. The sensory details of the room intensify as the evening deepens. The scent of the lavender in the floor coverings becomes stronger as the servants move through the room to light the candles. The beeswax has a sweet, heavy aroma that mingles with the smell of the apple wood burning in the fireplace. You watch as the young man rises to take his leave. There is a formal bow, a final lingering look, and the sound of his leather boots clicking against the stones as he exits. The performance is over for the day, but the work of the lineage continues. The ladies in waiting set aside their embroidery, their movements slow and practiced. The social machine of the castle is winding down, but its purpose remains clear. You walk toward the window and look out at the landscape. From this height, you can see the lands that will be joined by this union. The fields, the forests, and the distant villages all look peaceful in the twilight. But you know that this peace is maintained by the strength of the castle and the stability of the family within it. The stone mountain depends on the people, and the people depend on the lineage. You feel a sense of profound continuity. The children who will one day play in the courtyard below are already being imagined here, in the quiet of the solar. They are the ghosts of the future, just as the ancestors are the ghosts of the past. The castle is a living thing, and its heartbeat is found in these private moments. You think about the quiet strength required to live a life so defined by duty. There is a beauty in it, a sense of belonging to something that will outlast your own breath by 500 years. The rafters above you have seen a dozen such courtships, and they will see a dozen more. Each one adds a new layer of memory to the room, a new scent to the tapestries, and a new name to the genealogies kept in the chapel. You realize that courtship in the solar is the ultimate act of preservation. It is the way the castle ensures it will never be a ruin. The last of the sunlight fades, leaving only the warm, orange glow of the hearth. The shadows on the walls seem to dance, the woven hunters in the tapestries appearing to move in the flickering light. You find yourself reflecting on the nature of love within these walls. It is not the wild, untamed love of the forest. It is a cultivated love, a garden that is tended with care and protected by thick walls of gray rock. It is a love that understands its own importance. It is a love of lineage. You turn away from the window and prepare to descend back to the lower levels. The sound of your footsteps is a quiet accompaniment to the settling of the castle. You pass a heavy chest in the corner, its lid carved with scenes of a wedding feast. Inside are the linens and the silver that will be used when the contract is finally signed. Everything is prepared. Everything has its place. To live your entire life inside a castle is to accept that you are part of a grand design. Your life is a thread in the tapestry, woven with intention and held in place by the weight of the stone. As you reach the door, you take one last look at the room. The fire is burning low, and the ladies in waiting are beginning to retire. The solar is returning to its state of quiet contemplation. It is a room that knows how to wait. It has waited for centuries for the right people to sit in its windows, and it will wait centuries more. You step back out onto the spiral staircase, the air growing cooler as you descend. The music of the lute has faded, replaced by the distant sound of the night watch on the battlements. The business of courtship is finished for the night, but the lineage is secure. The rafters remain, the stone holds, and the story of the people who live their lives inside the castle continues, one stitch, one word, and one generation at a time. You stand on the highest point of the southern tower as the sun begins to sink into a bank of thick, gray clouds. The wind-up here is different than it is in the sheltered courtyards. It is faster, colder, and it carries the scent of the distant forest and the salt of the sea. You rest your hands on the rough stone of a merlin, feeling the grit of centuries against your palms. For someone who has never left these walls, the view is a constant reminder of a paradox. This is your sanctuary, the only home you have ever known, but it is also a machine built for a singular, violent purpose. Every stone, every narrow slit in the masonry, and every heavy iron bolt in the floor was placed with one thought in mind. Someone is coming to take this from you. This is the siege mentality, a quiet, persistent hum that vibrates through the bedrock of your life. It is not always a loud, panicked fear. Most days, it is simply a way of being. It is the reason why you instinctively count the sacks of grain as you pass the granary. It is the reason why you check the tension of the ropes on the great cranes near the gatehouse every time you walk by. You are not just a resident. You are a component in a defensive system that has been bracing for impact since before you were born. The castle does not just sit on the land. It watches it. You walk along the wall walk, the narrow stone path that circles the perimeter. As you move, you pass the machicolations, those openings in the floor that hang out over the base of the wall. You look down through one of the gaps and see the dizzying drop to the dry moat below. In times of peace, these are just architectural curiosities, places where the wind whistles in a strange, hollow tone. But in your mind, you see them for what they are. Chutes for stones, boiling oil, or hot sand. You have seen the piles of smooth river rock stacked neatly in the corners of the towers, waiting. They have been there for years, gathering dust and moss, but they are never moved. They are part of the furniture of your existence, a domestic preparation for a catastrophe that might never come, but must always be expected. The sensory world of the siege mentality is one of heavy materials and calculated reserves. You make your way down a spiral staircase, your boots clicking rhythmically on the stone. You are heading toward the army, located in the cool, dim belly of the keep. As you push open the heavy door, the scent of the room hits you like a physical force. It is a thick, metallic smell, a mixture of cold iron, animal fat used for grease, and the sharp, piney aroma of wood shavings. Here, the tools of the castle's defense are kept in a state of eternal readiness. You walk between the racks of pikes and halberds. The wooden shafts are smooth and cool, polished by the hands of the men who maintain them. You see the rows of shields, their painted crests fading in the dim light, and the bundles of arrows tied with leather thongs. There is a profound stillness here, but it is a charged stillness. It feels like a long indrawn breath. You watch a smith as he works on a mail shirt, the rhythmic clinking of the metal rings a constant heartbeat for the room. He is not making something new. He is repairing, sharpening, and oiling. His work is a cycle of maintenance that reflects the life of the castle itself. You do not build for the future so much as you preserve the present against the threat of the horizon. To live your entire life inside a castle is to understand that your survival is tied to a closed loop. You are obsessed with the inventory of the earth. You find yourself walking toward the great cellars, the dark vaults where the food is kept. The air here is heavy and sweet with the smell of fermenting grain and the earthy musk of root vegetables stored in sand. You look at the rows of massive wooden barrels, each one filled with salted meat, dried fish, or hard biscuits. This is the castle's true armor. You know that a wall can be breached and a gate can be burned, but a hungry garrison is what truly ends a siege. You run your hand over the rough wood of a grain bin. You know the exact level of the wheat. You know how many months of life are contained within these shadows. This creates a specific kind of anxiety, a quiet counting that happens in the back of your mind as you eat your midday meal. Every crust of bread is a piece of the reserve. Every drop of water from the well is a precious resource that must be guarded. This is not the scarcity of poverty, but the scarcity of the target. You are well fed and well protected, but you are always aware of the limit. You live in a world where the horizon is a boundary that could close at any moment, turning your home into an island. As you step back out into the courtyard, the evening light has turned the stone to a deep, bruised gold. You see a group of young pages practicing with wooden swords. Their movements are repetitive, a series of strikes and parries that they have performed thousands of times. They are not just learning a skill. They are being assimilated into the machine. You watch their faces, tight with concentration, and you realize that they have never known a day without the possibility of an alarm. Their games are the rehearsals of war. Even their laughter has a sharp, focused edge to it. The psychological toll of this bracing is subtle. It manifests in the way the community reacts to rumors. A messenger arrives at the gate, his horse lathered in foam and his cloak dusty from the road. Within minutes, the atmosphere of the castle shifts. There is no shouting, but the pace of life quickens. The blacksmith's hammer rings a little faster. The laundry maids move with more purpose. The constable of the castle stands on the ramparts, his eyes fixed on the distant road. You feel a tightening in your chest, a familiar readiness that you have felt a dozen times before. It is a bracing for an impact that usually fades into nothing, but the preparation leaves a mark. It reinforces the idea that the world outside is a source of chaos, and the stone inside is the only order. You walk toward the gatehouse, the massive heart of the castle's defense. The portcullis, a heavy grate of iron and oak, hangs above you like the teeth of a giant. You look at the winches and the chains, greased and shining in the torchlight. You speak to the guard on duty, a man whose father and grandfather stood this same watch. He tells you a story of a siege from 80 years ago, a tale of how the gates held for 4 months while the town outside was leveled to the ground. To him, the story is a bedtime tale, a piece of family lore that justifies his entire existence. You realize that for your people, the siege is the defining event of history, even if you have never lived through one yourself. You are the children of the brace. His mentality extends to the very way you perceive the architecture of your home. You do not see a beautiful archway. You see a fatal bottleneck for an attacking force. You do not see a decorative tower. You see a vantage point for an archer. Your geography is a map of killing zones and safe havens. This does not make the castle a dark or miserable place. On the contrary, it makes it feel incredibly valuable. You love these stones because they are the only thing standing between you and the unpredictable storm of the world. The thicker the wall, the deeper the peace. As night fully settles over the keep, the first stars begin to appear between the crenellations. You hear the heavy, resonant thud of the main gates closing. It is a sound that vibrates through the soles of your feet, a final, decisive click that signals the end of the day. The drawbridge is raised, its chains groaning in the darkness. You feel a sense of profound relief. The world is shut out. The loop is closed. For the next few hours, the brace can relax, if only a little. You stand in the center of the inner ward, surrounded by the towering silhouettes of the gray stone. The torches are lit in their iron brackets, casting long, dancing shadows across the cobblestones. You think about the people who live in the villages, those whose homes are made of timber and thatch, open to the wind and the whim of any passing army. You feel a strange kind of pity for them. They have the freedom of the open road, but they lack the certainty of the granite. They live without the wall, and therefore, they live without the brace. You turn toward the great hall, where the warmth of the fire and the smell of roasting meat await. You realize that the siege mentality is not just about war. It is about belonging. It is the shared secret of everyone who lives within these walls. You are all part of the same prepared heart. You are all waiting together. This creates a bond that is stronger than blood. You are the people of the fortress, the ones who have traded the vastness of the world for the security of the stone. As you step into the warmth of the hall, the sound of the wind is finally cut off. You find your place at the table, the familiar faces of your neighbors lit by the flickering hearth. You break bread that was made from grain you helped count. You drink ale that was brewed in the safety of the inner ward. You are home. The impact may come tomorrow, or it may come in 100 years, but you are ready. You have spent your entire life becoming a part of this stone mountain, and as the firelight dances on the walls, you feel the strength of the brace holding you steady. The castle is not a cage. It is a promise. And in the silence of the night, as the sentries pace the walls above you, you find a deep and enduring peace in the knowledge that you are exactly where you are meant to be, protected by the very thing that makes you a target. You are standing at the very top of the highest tower, in a room where the air feels thin and the wind never truly stops its mournful song against the heavy oak shutters. This is the sola of the master of the keep, the inner sanctum of the man whose entire existence is defined by the stone that surrounds him. To the servants in the kitchen or the guards on the battlements, this room is a place of mystery and ultimate authority. To you, standing here in the center of the quiet, it is a place of immense and unrelenting weight. You are not merely a resident of this fortress. You are its mind, its will, and its primary servant. While others find their purpose in the physical labor of the day, your labor is the management of 1,000 lives and the preservation of a world that begins and ends at the gatehouse. You walk toward the heavy desk carved from dark, seasoned oak. It is a massive piece of furniture, scarred by the pens of those who ruled here before you. You reach out and touch the cold, silver signet ring resting on a small velvet cushion. This ring is not a piece of jewelry. It is a burden. When you slide it onto your finger, you feel the physical pressure of the responsibility it represents. Every decree, every order, and every tally of grain that leaves this room carries the weight of that seal. In a world of chaos and shifting loyalties, the master of the keep is the one who provides the structure. You are the anchor in the storm, and the stone walls are the physical manifestation of your will. The air in the solar smells of old parchment, expensive beeswax, and the faint, bitter tang of iron gall ink. You sit in the high-backed chair, feeling the velvet cushions give way beneath you. Before you lies a map of the surrounding lands, a tapestry of forests, rivers, and small villages that pay their tithes to the castle. But your eyes do not linger on the distance. They return to the detailed sketches of the castle foundations. You know the thickness of every curtain wall. You know the depth of every cellar. You know which tower has a slight lean and which gatehouse needs its winches greased. The castle is not a static object to you. It is a living machine that requires constant maintenance and a watchful eye. You pick up a quill, the feather scratching softly against the thick vellum of a ledger. This is the true work of ruling. You are counting sacks of rye, barrels of salted herring, and bundles of arrow shafts. You are calculating the cost of a new roof for the stables and the wages of a dozen additional archers for the winter watch. Every resource must be measured and husbanded. If the harvest is poor, you are the one who must decide how the rations are distributed. If a fever strikes the lower wards, you are the one who must order the isolation of the sick. The burden of the inner circle is the knowledge that every soul within these walls looks to you for their survival. You cannot afford the luxury of a single mistake. You stand and walk toward the high window, pushing open the shutter just a fraction. The wind rushes in, cold and sharp, carrying the distant sounds of the bailey below. You see the blacksmith at his forge, the red glow of the fire a tiny spark in the gray morning. You see the laundry maid spreading linen on the grass to dry. To them, the castle is a place of routine and community. They share their meals, their gossip, and their fears. But as the master of the keep, your community is a small and lonely one. You occupy the inner circle, a space of high walls and heavy doors that separate you from the very people you protect. Your interactions are defined by rank and duty. Even your family, living in the chambers nearby, is part of this hierarchy. You watch a messenger gallop through the gatehouse, the sound of his horse's hooves a rhythmic drumming against the cobblestones. You know that within minutes, he will be standing before you, his clothes stained with the mud of the road, carrying news that could change the fate of everyone you see. To be the master of the keep is to live in a state of perpetual readiness. You are always listening for the sound of the alarm bell, always watching for a change in the horizon. The security of the castle is not just about the strength of the stone. It is about the speed of your decisions and the clarity of your judgment. You turn away from the window and look at the fire burning in the hearth. The flames are bright and cheerful, but they cannot fully banish the chill that seems to seep from the granite walls. You think about the men who stood here before you, your father and your grandfather, and those whose names have been lost to the damp of the archives. They all lived their lives within this same room. They all felt the same weight of the silver ring. There is a profound sense of continuity in this life. You are a temporary tenant in an eternal structure. The castle has outlived them all, and it will outlive you. This realization brings a strange kind of peace. You are not alone in your burden. You are part of a lineage of guardians who have kept this stone world turning for centuries. You decide to leave the solar and walk through the keep. As you descend the spiral staircase, your hand rests on the smooth stone of the central pillar. You can feel the vibration of the castle around you. You hear the muffled voices of servants, the clatter of buckets at the well, and the distant lowing of cattle in the stables. You are moving through the body of your responsibility. You walk through the great hall, where the morning light filters through the high windows, illuminating the dust motes that dance in the air. The long tables are empty now, waiting for the noise and heat of the midday meal. You see a young page scrubbing the stones of the hearth, his movements slow and methodical. He looks up as you pass, his eyes filled with a mixture of respect and awe. You give him a brief nod, a small acknowledgement of the connection that binds you both to this place. You continue your walk, moving toward the kitchens. The air grows warmer here, filled with the savory smell of roasting meat and the sweet aroma of baking bread. You speak with the steward, discussing the levels of the flour bins and the condition of the salted meat in the larder. You do not just take his word for it. You inspect the barrels yourself, your fingers feeling the grit of the salt and the coldness of the stone floor. You are verifying the foundations of your community's survival. A master of the keep who does not know the state of his kitchens is a man who is inviting disaster. From the kitchens, you move to the army. The scent of oiled iron and leather is strong here. You watch as a group of men-at-arms polishes their breastplates and sharpens their spears. You check the tension on the great crossbows and the condition of the spare shields. You speak with the captain of the guard, reviewing the rosters for the night watch and the schedule for the gatehouse. You are ensuring that the shell of the castle remains hard and impenetrable. Every bolt, every hinge, and every link of mail is a part of the defense you manage. As the day progresses, you find yourself back in your solar, hearing petitions from the people who live under your protection. A farmer has a dispute over a boundary line. A craftsman seeks permission to expand his workshop. A widow asks for assistance during the lean months of spring. You sit in judgment, your voice calm and measured. You are the final arbiter of justice within these walls. You must be fair, but you must also be firm. The order of the castle depends on the predictability of your laws. You listen to their stories, feeling the weight of their lives pressing against your own. Their problems are your problems. Their successes are the castle's successes. By the time the sun begins to set, the room is filled with long, purple shadows. You are tired, your mind weary from the constant stream of numbers, names, and decisions. You dismiss your last attendant and find yourself once again in the silence of the high tower. You reach for a small ceramic jug and pour a cup of wine, the liquid a deep, dark red in the fading light. You take a sip, feeling the warmth spread through your chest. You look at the silver signet ring on your finger, its surface reflecting the orange glow of the dying fire. You realize that for a man who lives his entire life inside a castle, the concept of home is something much larger than a single room or a single bed. The entire fortress is your home. The stones are your skin. The corridors are your veins. The people are your heart. You are inextricably tied to the rhythm of this place. You will never know the freedom of the road or the anonymity of the distant city. Your destiny is written in the lime and the granite. You will live here, you will rule here, and one day, you will be buried beneath the stones of the chapel, joining the ranks of the guardians who came before. The darkness deepens, and you reach out to light a single candle. The flame is small and steady, a tiny beacon in the vastness of the keep. You look at the map on your desk, the lines of the castle foundations glowing in the candlelight. You feel a sense of profound pride. The walls are strong. The larders are full. The people are safe. For today, the burden has been carried. You have done your duty to the stone and to the souls it shelters. You stand and walk to the window one last time, looking down at the dark courtyard where the first lanterns are being lit. The castle is settling into the night, its pulse slow and steady. You are the master of the keep, the guardian of the inner circle, and as long as you stand watch, the world within these walls will endure. You close the shutter, the heavy wood clicking into place, and turn toward the quiet rest that you have earned. You sit in the deep embrasure of the solar window, a place you have claimed as your own for more than 5 decades. The stone beneath your thin cushion is cold and unyielding, a familiar pressure that has supported you from the days of your youth until this quiet, gray afternoon. Outside the narrow pane of greenish glass, the sky is a pale, bruised violet, the color of a winter evening just before the first frost settles on the battlements. You do not look out at the horizon with the same hunger you once did. To you, the world beyond the curtain wall is no longer a place of potential or adventure. It is a distant painting, beautiful and unreachable, a silent backdrop to the only reality you have ever truly known. Your universe is contained within these thick walls of limestone and mortar, and as the years have passed, the castle has become less of a fortress and more of a second skin. You reach out with a hand that is now mapped with thin, blue veins and liver spots, touching the rough surface of the interior wall. The masonry is familiar to you in a way that the faces of the new servants can never be. You know every crack in the lime wash, every uneven joint where the masons long ago struggled to fit a cornerstone, and every patch where the dampness from the well below has seeped through to create a map of salt and lichen. This stone is your history. You remember the sound of the hammers when the new tower was raised, a rhythmic clinking that lasted for an entire summer of your childhood. You remember the smell of the fresh mortar, sharp and acrid, as it was stirred in great pits in the inner ward. Now, that same stone is weathered and gray, its raw edges softened by the passage of time and the constant friction of human life. The solar is quiet now, filled only with the soft, repetitive hiss of the fire in the hearth. This room has always been the heart of your private world. It is a place of scent and shadow. The air carries the lingering perfume of dried lavender and rose petals, kept in ceramic jars to combat the persistent, earthy smell of the castle itself. You can smell the beeswax of the candles that wait on the sideboard and the heavy, metallic scent of the iron fire dogs that have stood guard over the flames for generations. To age within these walls is to become intimately acquainted with the layers of smell that define a home. There is the scent of old wool and fine silk, the smell of vellum and ink from the desk in the corner, and always, the faint, comforting tang of wood smoke that seems to live in the very threads of the tapestries. You turn your gaze to the wall hangings that surround you. They are massive, heavy sheets of woven history that ripple slightly in the drafts that inevitably find their way through the masonry. You have watched these scenes for 80 years. You know the exact number of threads that make up the eye of the hunting dog in the foreground, and you know the way the light catches the silver thread of the lady's gown as the sun moves toward the west. These tapestries are your companions. They do not age as you do. The knights on their chargers are still vibrant and young, forever frozen in the moment of the chase, while you have felt your own strength recede like the tide. You realize that the castle is a place of preservation. It holds the memories of the dead in its stones and its fabrics, keeping them present even when their voices have long been silenced. The geography of your life has become vertical. In your youth, you ran up and down the spiral staircases without a thought, your boots clicking against the stone in a rapid, joyful rhythm. Now, the stairs are a challenge to be negotiated with care. You place your hand on the central newel, the stone pillar that acts as the spine of the tower, and you feel its cold, polished surface. It has been worn smooth by thousands of hands over the centuries, a physical record of the people who have climbed toward the light or descended into the shadows. Your world has narrowed to these few upper rooms, the chapel, and the high wall walk where the air is fresh. You know every uneven step, every place where the masonry has shifted, and every landing where you must pause to catch your breath. You listen to the sounds of the castle below. It is a symphony of habitation that you can interpret without even looking. You hear the heavy, metallic clank of the portcullis being tested, a sound that vibrates through the very floor beneath your feet. You hear the distant, rhythmic thud of the blacksmith's hammer, a heartbeat that tells you the work of the fortress is continuing. You hear the muffled shouts of the stable hands and the barking of the hounds in the courtyard. These sounds are the pulse of your existence. They provide a sense of order and predictability that the world outside cannot offer. Inside the walls, the routine is absolute. The bells of the chapel mark the hours of prayer, the changing of the guard marks the passage of the day, and the arrival of the evening meal marks the return to the hearth. As an elder of the keep, you have become a keeper of the keys, if not in a physical sense, then in a spiritual one. You see the young pages as they dash through the corridors, their faces bright with the same excitement you once felt. You watch the young knights as they practice in the tilt yard, their armor gleaming in the sun. They look at you and see a figure of the past, a part of the castle's ancient furniture. They do not realize that you are the thread that connects them to the foundations of the place. You remember the names of the masons who carved the gargoyles on the roof. You remember the lord who built the great hall and the lady who planted the first herbs in the kitchen garden. To you, the castle is not just a building. It is a living, breathing community that spans generations. The twilight in the solar deepens, and the orange glow of the fire becomes the dominant light in the room. You watch the shadows dance across the ceiling beams, long and distorted shapes that seem to act out the stories you have heard and told throughout your life. In this light, the stone walls seem to soften, their hard edges blurred by the flickering flames. You feel a sense of profound belonging. The castle is not a cage, and it never has been. It is a sanctuary. It has protected you from the wars that raged across the plains, the famines that withered the crops, and the uncertainties of the road. Inside these gray stones, you have found a certainty that few in this age can claim. You think of the winter nights when the snow piled high against the outer gates and the world outside was a frozen, hostile wasteland. Inside the keep, the fires were kept burning, the larders were full, and the community huddled together in the warmth of the great hall. You remember the stories told by the hearth, the music of the lute drifting through the smoky air, and the feeling of absolute security that the thick walls provided. To age in a castle is to understand the value of a fortress. It is to know that you are part of something enduring, something that was here long before you were born and will remain long after you have been laid beneath the chapel floor. You reach for the small bell on the table to summon a servant for the evening candles. The sound is clear and high, a sharp note that cuts through the stillness of the room. Soon, the soft tread of feet will approach the door, and the warm, golden light of the beeswax will fill the corners of the solar. You prepare yourself for the ritual of the evening, the closing of the shutters, the stoking of the fire, and the final prayers before sleep. Your movements are slow, but they are purposeful. Every action is a part of the rhythm of the stone. The sun has finally disappeared, leaving only a thin line of fire on the horizon. The greenish glass of the window has turned to a dark, reflective mirror, showing you a glimpse of your own face against the backdrop of the room. You see the reflection of the tapestries, the hearth, and the heavy oak furniture. You are a part of the composition, a figure in the landscape of the keep. You realize that your life has been a long conversation with this building. You have shaped it with your presence, and it has shaped you with its boundaries. As the first candle is lit, you feel the familiar comfort of the evening routine. The castle is settling down for the night, its heavy gates barred and its watchmen in place on the ramparts. You are exactly where you were meant to be. The grey stones are cold, the shadows are long, and the air is filled with the scent of wood smoke and history. You settle back into your chair, feeling the weight of the centuries around you, and you find peace in the silence. The twilight of the solar is not a time of ending, but a time of reflection, a quiet moment in the eternal story of the castle and the people who lived their entire lives within its grace. You close your eyes, letting the warmth of the fire and the solidity of the walls anchor you to the present, a single life woven into the enduring fabric of the fortress. Ends. Imagine you are back in the solar, the highest and most private room in the keep. But the atmosphere has shifted. The vibrant colors of the tapestries have faded into the gray of twilight, and the cheerful crackle of the hearth has been replaced by the low, guttering sound of a single beeswax candle. The air is heavy, thick with the scent of bitter medicinal herbs, the metallic tang of a cooling room, and the sharp, clean smell of frankincense. You are standing by the massive four-poster bed, a structure of dark oak that has seen births, marriages, and now, the final transition. The heavy silk curtains are pulled back, and the light of the moon filters through the greenish glass of the window, casting a pale, ghostly lattice across the floor. For the person lying in this bed, the castle has been their entire universe. They have spent decades within these walls, and now, they are preparing to move into the one room they have never truly inhabited. You reach out and touch the heavy wool blankets. They are cold. The heat of the fire no longer reaches this far into the room, and the stone walls seem to be drawing the warmth away, claiming it for themselves. The silence is absolute, broken only by the rhythmic, labored breathing of the dying lord. In a castle, death is not a private affair. Even here, in the most secluded chamber, there are witnesses. The chaplain stands at the foot of the bed, his shadow stretching long and thin across the rush-covered floor. Two servants wait in the shadows of the doorway, their heads bowed. This is the final ritual of the gated life. The castle, which provided protection and structure for a lifetime, is now preparing to receive its inhabitant into its deepest foundation. The chaplain begins to speak, his voice a low, steady murmur that vibrates against the stone. He is performing the last rites, the words of the commendation of the soul echoing softly off the high ceiling. You watch as he dips a small brush into a silver bowl of holy water and sprinkles it over the bed. The droplets catch the candlelight for a fleeting second before disappearing into the fabric. The smell of the water, mixed with the scent of the incense, creates a sensory bridge between the world of the living and the world of the spirit. To the people in this room, the transition is as physical as moving from one chamber to another. They believe that the soul will rise through the vents and chimneys of the keep, while the body will descend. As the final breath is taken, a profound stillness settles over the solar. The rhythmic breathing stops, and for a moment, the castle itself seems to hold its breath. The wind outside stops its whistling through the arrow slits, and even the hounds in the courtyard below fall silent. The steward of the castle enters the room, his footsteps heavy on the flagstones. He carries a large iron ring of keys. With a somber, practiced motion, he selects the smallest key and locks a carved wooden chest at the foot of the bed. It is a signal that the reign of this inhabitant is over. The keys will soon be passed to the next generation, but the body remains, a silent resident of the stone. Now begins the process of preparation. In the middle of the night, while the rest of the castle sleeps in the lower wards, the body is washed and wrapped in a shroud of fine white linen. This is done by the same hands that once served the meals and polished the armor. There is a deep, quiet respect in their movements. They know every scar, every wrinkle, and every mark of time on this body because they have lived alongside it for years. The linen is cold and crisp, smelling of lavender and dried hyssop. As the body is wrapped, it becomes anonymous, a white shape against the dark wood of the bed. It is no longer the Lord, it is now a traveler preparing for the final descent. You watch as 4 sturdy men-at-arms enter the chamber. They are dressed in their dark tunics, their faces solemn. They move to the bed and lift the pallet, their muscles straining under the weight. The journey out of the solar is a difficult one. The spiral staircase is narrow and steep, a throat of stone that was never designed for a procession of this nature. You follow them as they begin the descent. The only light comes from the torches held by the servants leading the way. The orange flames dance and flicker against the cold masonry, casting wild, distorted shadows that leap across the vaulted ceilings. The sound of the procession is a rhythmic, mournful percussion. The heavy boots of the men-at-arms click and scrape against the stone steps. The wood of the pallet creaks with every turn. You place your hand on the central stone pillar, the newel, feeling the vibration of their footsteps through the rock. This staircase has seen thousands of climbs, but the descent is always slower, always more deliberate. You can smell the torch smoke, a thick and acrid scent that fills the narrow space, mingling with the cold, damp air rising from the lower levels. The castle is a vertical world, and this journey is the final measurement of its height. They reach the level of the Great Hall, but they do not stop. They move through the vast, empty space, where the embers of the central hearth are nothing more than a faint red glow in the darkness. The high rafters are lost in shadow, and the tapestries on the walls seem to watch as the white shape passes by. The hall, which was so full of life and noise just a few hours ago, is now a silent corridor. The procession moves toward the back of the keep, toward the heavy, iron-studded door of the chapel. As the doors swing open, the scent of beeswax and old parchment meets you. The chapel is the most stable and enduring part of the fortress. Its walls are thick, and its windows are small, keeping the air inside still for centuries. The men-at-arms carry the pallet to the center of the nave and set it down upon a pair of low wooden trestles. The sound of the wood hitting the stone floor echoes sharply, a final punctuation mark in the silence. The chaplain is already there, standing behind the altar, his face illuminated by a dozen tall candles. You look down at the floor beneath your feet. It is a patchwork of history. You are standing on large, flat slabs of limestone, each one marked with a name, a date, or a coat of arms. Some of the stones are worn smooth in the center where generations of people have knelt to pray. You realize that you are not just in a place of worship, but in a place of memory. The floor is a ledger of everyone who has ever lived and died within these walls. To be buried here is to be written into the very foundation of the home. The burial itself is a slow, methodical labor. You watch as 2 stonemasons, their hands calloused and gray with dust, approach a specific slab in the floor. They use iron bars to lever the stone upward. The sound is a deep, grinding protest of rock against rock. As the slab is moved aside, a dark, rectangular void is revealed. The air that rises from the opening is incredibly cold and smells of wet earth and ancient minerals. This is the ground beneath the castle, the bedrock that supports the weight of the towers. The body, now placed within a simple coffin of heavy oak, is lowered into the earth. You hear the rhythmic chanting of the monks, a low and hypnotic sound that fills the chapel. It is a song that has been sung in this room for hundreds of years, the same notes and the same words used for every lord and every lady who came before. The sound of the ropes sliding against the wood of the coffin is a soft, shushing noise. When it finally touches the bottom, there is a dull, hollow thud that seems to resonate through the floor and into your own feet. The masons begin to replace the stone slab. They work with a quiet efficiency, spreading a fresh layer of lime mortar around the edges. This mortar is the same material used to build the battlements and the keep. It is the glue of the castle. As they slide the stone back into place, the grinding sound returns, more final this time. They use wooden mallets to tap the stone into its exact position, ensuring it is level with the rest of the floor. The rhythmic tapping is the last sound of the burial. It is the sound of the door being closed. You stand there for a long time after the others have left. The candles in the chapel have burned low, their flames dancing in the slight draft from the doorway. The new mortar around the slab is still wet, a pale white line that marks the boundary between the living and the dead. You realize that the person buried here has not truly left the castle. They have simply changed their state. They are no longer a resident of the solar or the hall, but they have become a part of the floor, a part of the very structure that protects the rest of the household. To live your entire life inside a castle is to understand that the building is more than just a shelter. It is a vessel for the continuity of the family. The person beneath the stone will be walked over by their children and their grandchildren. Their name will be read by every visitor who enters the chapel. In a world of chaos and change, the castle offers a terrifying but comforting permanence. You look at the effigy of a knight on a nearby tomb, his stone eyes staring up at the vaulted ceiling. He has been there for 200 years, and he will likely be there for 200 more. The final descent is not a departure, it is an integration. As you turn to leave the chapel, your footsteps quiet on the old stones, you feel the weight of the history around you. The castle is not just a place where people lived. It is a place where they remain. The thick walls, the deep wells, the high towers, and the cold crypts are all part of the same story. You move back toward the spiral stairs, the smell of the incense still clinging to your clothes. The sun will rise again in a few hours, and the life of the castle will resume its busy, noisy rhythm. But here, beneath the floor, the silence will endure, a steady and unmoving anchor for the world above. You reach the doorway and look back one last time at the guttering candles. The descent is finished. The inhabitant is home. You stand in the center of the inner ward, surrounded by the towering walls that have defined every moment of your existence. The light of the evening has faded into a deep, velvet blue, and the stars are beginning to pierce the darkness above the battlements. Around you, the castle is settling into its nightly slumber, but as you stand there, you realize that the air is not empty. It is thick with the weight of everything you have witnessed. To live a life entirely within these walls is to become a part of the stone itself. You are not just a tenant in this fortress. You are a layer of its history, a breath in its long, slow respiration. Every stone around you, every block of finely worked ashlar, holds a piece of a story that will eventually become a legend. Walk toward the nearest wall of the keep. The surface is smooth and cool, a testament to the skill of the masons who squared these stones with such precision that you can barely fit a knife blade between the joints. This is the ashlar, the skin of the castle. It is the face that the world sees, but to you, it is something much more intimate. You run your hand over the surface, feeling the subtle indentations left by the tools of the men who built this place. There is a specific rhythm to these marks, a series of diagonal lines that speak of a steady hand and a heavy mallet. You realize that you are touching the physical manifestation of a lifetime of labor. The man who carved this stone might have spent his entire life within the quarry and the building site, pouring his strength into these blocks so that you might stand here today in safety. You look closer at the stone and find a small, carved symbol. It is a mason mark, a simple geometric shape that served as a signature for the artisan. To most, it is an anonymous scratch, but to you, it is a reminder that the castle is not just a pile of rock. It is a collection of individual efforts. You think of the thousands of people whose names are lost to time but whose presence is etched into the very fabric of the building. The scullery maid who carried buckets of water until the stones of the kitchen floor were worn into hollows. The clerk who spent 40 years in the solar, his ink-stained fingers leaving faint smudges on the vellum of the accounts. The blacksmith whose rhythmic pounding provided the heartbeat of the courtyard for half a century. Their lives were not recorded in grand chronicles, but they are recorded here, in the texture of the wood and the smoothness of the stone. The acoustics of the inner ward change at night. Without the bustle of the day, the sound of the wind moving through the crenellations becomes a low, haunting whistle. It is an echo of the past. You imagine the voices that have traveled through these corridors, the laughter of children playing in the rushes, the sharp commands of the sergeant of the watch, and the low, melodic chanting from the chapel. These sounds do not truly disappear. They are absorbed by the porous stone, held within the masonry like a secret. When you stand in the silence, you can almost hear them. You are standing in a place where time does not move in a straight line. It circles back on itself, like the spiral staircases that wind through the towers. Imagine the perspective of someone who has never seen the horizon without the frame of a stone window. Your sense of distance is defined by the height of the walls. The world is not a vast, sprawling map, but a series of vertical layers. You know the exact feeling of the air as you climb from the damp, heavy atmosphere of the cellars to the thin, sharp breeze of the battlements. You know the smell of each room, from the spicy, warm scent of the bakery to the dry, dusty aroma of the library. This is your universe. Every corner of it has been explored, every stone has been touched. To you, the outside world is a distant painting, a beautiful but alien landscape that has no bearing on the reality of your life. As you lean against the wall, you think about the concept of home. For those who live their entire lives inside, the castle is not a cage. It is a sanctuary. It is a place where every person has a place and every action has a purpose. There is a profound sense of security in the predictable rhythms of the fortress. You know that the gates will close at the same time every evening. You know that the fires will be lit as the shadows begin to stretch across the ward. You know that the seasons will change, and the castle will adapt, shifting from the cool, breezy halls of summer to the warm, communal spaces of winter. It is a closed loop, a self-contained ecosystem that provides everything you need for survival and for meaning. You find yourself walking toward the great hall. The heavy oak doors are closed now, but you can still smell the lingering scent of wood smoke and roasted meat. This is the stage where the public legend of the castle is written. You think of the feasts that have taken place here, the diplomatic negotiations, and the quiet evenings by the central hearth. This room has seen the height of human ambition and the depth of human sorrow. But for the people who lived here, the great hall was also a dining room, a workspace, and sometimes a bedroom. The grand events of history are only a small part of the story. The true legend is the steady, day-to-day endurance of the community. You move back toward the center of the courtyard and look up at the keep. It is a massive, dark silhouette against the starry sky. You realize that your life is inextricably tied to this structure. The stone has watched you grow, and one day, it will watch you leave. But even when you are gone, a part of you will remain. You will be another echo in the ashlar, another ghost in the corridor. Your life will be added to the collective memory of the fortress, joining the thousands of others who found their entire existence within these boundaries. This is the ultimate destiny of those who live in the stone. You become a part of something that is immutable and eternal. You think about the keys that you carry. They are heavy, cold, and iron. They represent the responsibility of maintaining this world. To pass the keys to the next generation is to pass on the duty of memory. You are teaching them how to read the stones, how to listen to the wind, and how to respect the silence of the chapel. You are ensuring that the cycle continues, that the fire in the hearth is never allowed to die, and that the gates are always barred against the darkness. It is a sacred trust. You are the bridge between the past and the future, the guardian of a world that exists in its own time. As you prepare to return to your quarters, you take one last look around the ward. You see the faint glow of a candle in a high window, a small spark of human life in the vast mountain of stone. You feel a sense of profound peace. You are home. The world outside may be chaotic and unpredictable, but here, inside the walls, there is order. There is a sense of belonging that is as solid as the masonry itself. You are not just a person living in a castle. You are a part of a legend that is written in lime, oak, and iron. The path beneath your feet is worn and familiar. You know every uneven flagstone, every patch of moss that grows in the shade. You move through the darkness with a confidence that comes from a lifetime of experience. The castle is your companion, a silent witness to your joys and your struggles. It does not judge, and it does not change. It simply exists, a monument to human ingenuity and the desire for permanence. You realize that the castle has shaped you as much as the masons shaped the stone. Your character has been tempered by the cold, your spirit has been lifted by the height, and your heart has been anchored by the weight of the walls. You reach the entrance to the keep and place your hand on the cold iron of the door handle. Before you go inside, you look up one last time at the stars. They seem so close from here, as if you could reach out from the battlements and touch them. You are a resident of a world that is both tiny and infinite. You are a person who has lived an entire life within the stone, and you have found a richness and a depth that few others can understand. Your story is not one of conquest or of travel, but one of presence. You were here. You remained. You endured. You pull the door open and step into the warmth of the hallway. The smell of the candle wax and the dry, ancient dust greets you like an old friend. The light of the last candle is waiting for you, a soft and golden glow that guides you toward your rest. You are tired, but it is a good tiredness, the result of a day well spent in the service of your home. You climb the stairs, the stone cold beneath your feet, and feel the immense weight of the fortress around you. It is a comforting weight, a protective embrace that will hold you safe throughout the night. As you reach your room and prepare for sleep, the sounds of the castle continue to whisper to you. You hear the far-off call of a sentry, the scurrying of a mouse in the rafters, and the slow, rhythmic breathing of the building itself. You realize that the legend of the castle is not something that happened in the distant past. It is something that is happening right now, in every breath you take and every dream you have. You are the living legend of the ashlar, the human heart inside the stone body. You close your eyes, and the darkness of the room is filled with the echoes of 1,000 years, a chorus of voices that tell you that you are exactly where you belong. You are part of the stone, and the stone is part of you, forever.